Hi and welcome to this video. I'm going to do an Ubuntu 22.04 initial server setup, and I will be using Vultr as my cloud provider of choice, but you can follow along with any VPS provider of your choice. Once you log into your server, you can follow along with me without any problems. So the post that I'm going to follow, I've already written it, and I will provide the link in the description. But if I don't provide the link, you can just go to Google and search for Ubuntu 22.04 setup Bizanosa. Okay, so this is the post that we're going to use in this. We're going to do all this. We're going to deploy, log in, see how we can do all these things just to make sure that our Ubuntu 22.04 production server is safe for use. Ubuntu 22.04 setup Bizanosa, and you're going to see that initial server setup post. Just click on that and it's going to bring you to this post, and this is the one we're going to use to set up our Ubuntu server. I've already tried all these steps on Debian 11 and they work with Debian 11 as well. So if you want to use Debian and not Ubuntu, you can follow along with this post. So I will come back to Vultr. First step, let us deploy our server. So I'll just click there on deploy, or you can click there as well to deploy a new server. So there are different types of servers here, but just in brief, optimized cloud, these are dedicated VPSes. So if you need dedicated VPSes, this is where you'd come. Then cloud compute, these are the normal VPSes that you can get on Vultr. And then there's cloud GPU. If you need instances that have graphic cards, you can use that. If you want dedicated servers, you can try that. But of course, we want to try cloud compute. And under cloud compute, we're going to choose AMD high performance. You can choose any one of these others, but I'm going to choose AMD high performance. And I will choose a location in America. I will choose Chicago. And then the operating system, of course, I want to use Ubuntu 22.04. Server size, I will leave it at $12. You can see it is $12, but the price is $14.40. That is because I think backup is selected. So if you don't want to enable backups, you can disable that, but you should probably just enable it for security purposes, just for you to know that you have a backup. I'm going to disable it. Of course, you want to enable IPv6. You want your server to be able to support IPv6, and then no public IPv. If you don't want a public IPv4 address, then you can select that there. I can see this is new. You can select that there. And then you can enable DDoS protection for $10 a month. You can enable cloud init. If you have certain Linux bash scripts that you want to run as soon as your server is set up, you can add that there. Once you click on it, you'll be able to add your bash script down here. Just paste in your script if you have a script. And then virtual private clouds. Let's say you want your servers, you're going to deploy multiple servers and you want them to talk to each other. You can enable virtual private clouds. This is just networking within the servers that you will deploy. If you're going to deploy multiple servers, you can enable that, but I don't need this feature, so I'm going to leave it unchecked. And then SSH, I'm not going to do anything with SSH here, because when I come here, you'll see that one of the things that I do here in step 4 will be Ubuntu SSH key login setup. We're going to see how we can log in with SSH key on Ubuntu, and we're going to see how we can set that up. I will not be dealing with that on Vultr. And then firewall groups. If you want to set up a firewall group, you can do that. So a firewall group is basically firewall rules that you set up that you can add to any server that you deploy. If you click there on manage, you'll be able to see the interface for that, and you can add a firewall rule, and then you can add certain rules in this group. You can add certain rules in this group, and then you'd be able to attach any server inside of this rule. So you can see SSH is already added, and this is good for something like Kubernetes. Let's say you're installing Kubernetes on your own. You can come in here and allow the various ports that need to be allowed for Kubernetes and deny any access, any incoming traffic or outgoing traffic that you don't want to be allowed into or out of your server. So you can deal with that there. So the server host name, now this is important because if you're going to send mail from this server, you need to have a fully qualified domain name as a host name. A fully qualified domain name could be a subdomain or a full domain, provided that it is a name where when you add DNS records, it can be accessed. That is a fully qualified domain name. An example here, I could use something like cp3.bizanosa.com. That is going to change the server host name for our Ubuntu server. So make sure you add a fully qualified domain name. If you don't want to use a subdomain name, you can use a full domain name. All right, so I think that's pretty much everything that we need for our server. Location, server image, we've chosen Ubuntu. Server size, choose whichever server size you want to use. Everything else is as I want it. If you want multiple servers, you want to deploy multiple servers with the same settings, you can choose the number of servers that you want to deploy down here. For me, I want to deploy one server, and I'm just going to click on deploy now. As soon as the server has been deployed, I'm going to get an IP address and the root user plus the root user's password, and I'm going to use that to log into my server. So while that is happening, let's talk about how we can access our VPS, our server, via SSH. So to do that, whether you're on Windows or you're on a Mac, there is a way for you to do that. For me, I'm on Windows, so I'm going to use git bash, but you can still follow along with me whether you're on a Mac or you're on Linux. So let's go online, and we're going to look for, if you're on Windows, look for this, look for git bash. Git download. Install Git, download it, download 64-bit or 32-bit, and then install it. And once you install it, just come in here and then search for git bash. Open up git bash. Once you open up git bash, you can use it to log into your server. And if you're on a Mac or on Linux, just open up terminal, and this will just be the same process. Whether you're on Windows, Mac or Linux, just use terminal on a Mac, terminal on Linux, and you can follow along with me. Let's go back to Vultr, and we want to see if our server is now ready. And you can see our server is ready. So I can just click on it to go deeper into the server. All the details for our server will be here. Everything for our server is here. The IPv6 address, IPv4 address, the username is root by default, and then password, you can copy that there or you can show it there. So let's come back to our server to log in. So I'm going to copy the IP address if I want to log into my server, and I'm going to come back to git bash. So on git bash, I'm just going to write SSH, and the user is root at the IP address. And on git bash, if you want to paste, you can do shift insert, or you can just right click and paste, or you can even go inside of the settings here, and there's somewhere where you can make it such that if you right click, you can paste SSH root, and then put in your IP address there, press enter. You will be asked for your password, and when they ask you for the password, so connection refused, let's restart our server. First of all, the connection has refused. If the connection refuses like that, let's just restart the server. So just give it time to start. Okay, now we can try to log in. So let me just press enter. And it's going to ask me if I want to add the key for this server onto my hosts file. So when I do this, it's going to add this to my hosts file, and it's going to treat this IP address as a trusted server on my computer. I'm going to type yes to accept that I want this to be added to my hosts file. Yes, so now this IP has been added to the list of my non-hosts file. So let's add in the password. I'm going to come back here, and I will paste the password. Paste. So when you paste the password in, or when you type it in, you won't be able to see it. So just press enter. So connection was closed because I took too long. Let me clear the screen by doing Control L. Enter. And then I will paste the password. Press enter. And now I'm logged into my server as root. If I want to do anything else on my server, I can do it. Let me clear the screen again. I'll do Control L to clear the screen, and then I'm going to update my server. Since I'm the root user, I don't really need to use sudo, so I'm just going to do apt update, and I'm going to do apt upgrade as well. So this is going to update my server. So it tells me that all the packages are up to date. Okay. That's why normally if you just want to see if there are any updates, what you do is you just do sudo apt update. And this is going to tell you if you have any update. So all packages are up to date. So that's pretty much it for how to deploy Ubuntu and then log into your server. The next process, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to come in here, and then I'm going to create a new user, and then I'm going to set up SSH key, create a new user and set up an SSH key authentication for our server. So let's get to that next. Whenever you install a Linux operating system, normally the root user is the default user, and everybody that knows about Linux knows that. That is why whenever you get a new server, a new VPS server, you need to create a new user that you can use to log into your server, and then you can disable the root user from logging into your server via SSH. Once the user is created, we're going to add the user to sudoers group. And then after that, we'll see how we can set up SSH key authentication for that user. But first, let's start by creating a new user. If you're not already on this post, I have created a short link for this post, and you can just go to bizanosa.com/Ubuntu22. That's going to bring you to this post. You can come down and click wherever you want to go to. So I'm going to go to create a sudo user. First, I want to create a user. So to add a user on Linux, almost any Linux system, you just use the command add user and then the name of the user. And then after that, we're going to add this user to the user group, sudo group. User mode is just a way for you to modify a user. You can modify lots of different things about a user. In this case, we're modifying the group G to sudo for the user named new user. So first of all, let's just create the new user, and I want to create a new user. I'll just call the new user as it is here. So let me go back to git bash and let me clear the screen. Control L, paste. Let's call it the new user 3. So adding the user, give the user a new name, a new password. Give it a strong password because this is going to be your new administrator on your Linux machine. So make sure you give this user a strong password. Another password. Retype the password. So the password has been updated successfully, and then you can add more details about your user. I'm just going to press enter to skip all this. Is the information correct? Press enter. Now we have the new user. Now the next step is we're going to modify the new user. We want to add them to the sudo group, and the sudo group can perform root level tasks by using the command sudo. So you just add the keyword sudo before any command, and they will be able to do it. So let's come down here, and we're going to just copy this, paste the new user was called the new user 3. So make sure you change it with the name of your user. Enter, and now this user should be in the sudos group. So let's switch. Instead of switching to that new user, let's just try to log into the server using the new user that we've created. So I'm going to open a new instance of Git Bash, and we're going to try to log in with the new user. Let me come back here. I want to copy the IP address. And now we need to enter the password that we set for the new user. There we go. We are logged in as the new user. We can try to run sudo to see if we've been successfully added onto the sudo group. So I'm going to do Control L to clear the screen. So I can do something like sudo top. The first time you run sudo, you need to enter the password, and consequently, you won't have to run it. You won't have to add it again until your session expires. So after adding the password for my user, you can see that we can run sudo. I'm just going to do Control C to get out of this. And I can do Control L again to clear the screen. Let's try again. Let's try something else. Let's do sudo update to see if we can update the server. And since we can do that, it means that everything is working well, and we can see we don't have any packages to update. You've seen how you can create a new user in Ubuntu. You've seen how you can create a new user in Ubuntu and then add the user to the sudoers group. The next step, let us set up SSH key login for Ubuntu 22.04. And that's the next step. Let's get started on that. Let's set up public key authentication for our server. So with this, we're going to log in using the key pair. We're going to generate an SSH key, and we're going to add the public key onto the server, and then the private key is going to remain on our computer, and we're going to use that to log into our server. I'm on Windows, and therefore I'm going to be using Git Bash as I've been doing with the rest of this setup. If you're on a Mac or Linux, don't worry, you can follow along with me. The steps are the same. Let's get started. So if you want to get to this post, as I've told you, just go to bizanosa.com/Ubuntu22. That's going to redirect you to this page, bizanosa.com/Ubuntu22. Click on SSH key and we can get started. So install, if you don't have Git already installed, just install Git, open Git Bash. Now that we've confirmed that we can log in with the new user and the new user has the permissions for sudo, what we can do is we can close the root user screen. We don't need to do anything with the root user anymore. We just needed to log in and create the new user. So after this, we're going to disable the root user from logging in, and we're also going to disable password authentication so that people can only log in using the key that we set up. So since I'm on Windows, the first thing I want to do is I want to create a folder. Now, this method of creating SSH keys is very good. It's a very nice one because you'll find that you'll not override your keys. Okay, this is very important. Sometimes you have multiple servers, and if you do it the way most people show you online, you're going to override your keys and you'll lose access to those servers forever. I need to make a directory. If you're on Linux, making a directory is really not that difficult. You can just go to your Git Bash and then you can make a directory. Let's create a folder. So on Windows, just go to your home directory. So your home directory, that's where your home directory is. If you don't know how to get there, you can also get here by going to your C drive, users, and then your name. So it's the same. After installing Git Bash, you'll have a folder here called .ssh, and inside of this, you can set up the different SSH. You can create a folder where you can save your SSH keys. So I can just create a new one, or I can create one within another. So this is a really nice way because you can group different keys for different servers. In this case, tutorials. I will go inside of the tutorials folder and I want to create a new folder, and I will call this Ubuntu 22.04. that. Once I do that, I want to copy the path. I want to copy this path. Copy. I will put it here. So let me have this, because there are certain things I don't want to be editing anything on Git Bash, because it will take a lot of time. This entire thing, whether you're on Windows or on a Mac, as long as you're using Git Bash on Windows, this entire path can be replaced by a tilde. So even on Mac or on Windows, on Linux, the tilde is just a path, a shortcut for your home directory. That will be our new path. This is where we are going to store the keys. So let's come back here and follow along. So we've created the folder where we are going to store the keys. You can see here, I stored it inside here, but you can store it inside of another folder like I've done. The way to generate the keys, you'll use SSH keygen. This is the command that is going to generate your keys. And then -t, this is going to be the specific type of your key. In this case, I'm creating an RSA key, and I want it to be 4096 bytes. Okay, so 4096 is more secure than anything below it. So make sure if you're using an RSA key, make sure it is a 4096 bit key that you create. And then -f, this is going to be the folder directory, or rather the file name for where we're going to store it. Okay, so the only thing I need from this is that. So once I copy this, SSH keygen is going to generate our keys, and it's going to store it inside of this directory that I've just created. So at this point, let me just paste it on a new line. I will paste it there. Let me increase the font size. So I'm going to do SSH keygen -f folder name. So remember that this is a folder name. I'm going to need to give the keys a name. So I'm going to call it, I can call it anything I want. Let me just call mine Ubuntu 22 keys. This will be the name of my private key and the public key. Once we generate them, you'll see 2 keys with that name inside of this folder. Just remember, you're doing this on your local computer. So these keys will be generated and they will be stored on your local machine. So when you open Git Bash, just open Git Bash and ensure you're not logged in on your server. This you're doing on your local computer. If you're logged in to your server, you can just do exit. So if I'm logged in, I can just do exit. And that's going to log me out. And then you can continue. So I'm going to paste in that. Paste. SSH keygen, that, all that. Everything is as it should be. And then I'm going to press enter. And this is also important. You need to add a passphrase to your key. This way, if somebody comes to your computer and they take your key and they go and they try to log in with your key, then they will need the passphrase. So the passphrase is a second security for your key. Make sure you create one and make sure it is one that you can remember. As a matter of fact, just save it somewhere, write it somewhere, because don't trust your memory all the time. You will forget these keys. Make sure you write it down first, and then that's when you type it on your screen so that you won't forget it and you'll know it is the same key. So I've added a key to mine. Even though I'm not going to use this server for anything, I've added a key to mine. I've added a passphrase to my key. Permission failed. So let's see what happened. SSH tutorials Ubuntu 22 keys failed. Permission denied. Okay, so I can see the issue here is probably the asterisks. The slashes you see on Windows. On Windows, the slashes are like that. That was my mistake. But on Linux, you can see this is how they're supposed to be. So that is just a mistake that I have made due to me working on Windows. You just need to know that on Windows, this needs to be a /. This is a / because the bash, on bash, this is like escaping something. So it was just escaping a space. So that is a very stupid mistake, but you're probably going to make it. So the problem is just this. As soon as I copy this, we can try again. Copy, and then I will come back here, there, and then I will do Control L to clear the screen. So I will paste. Everything is okay. Enter. And then I will enter the passphrase once again. So just remember that when you're working with Git bash, it is like you're working on the Linux environment. So the Linux shell is now accessible to you, and the Linux shell does not recognize the backslash. The backslash on Linux is escaping, okay? So it's just like in programming, when you're escaping things, use the backslash. The forward slash, this is the one for paths. This is the one for paths on Linux. So what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to come into the folder to show you that your keys are now generated. Now this is a public key. It has the .pub, and this is a private key. This is the one we're going to upload into the server. So whether you're on Linux or Mac or Windows, you'll find these keys now on your computer. If you go to the directory where you save them, inside of the .ssh, inside of the .ssh file folder, you're going to find them. But just remember, just note that your keys are there. You can find your keys there, okay? So I'm going to Control L to clear the screen, and then we can continue. The next step is to upload the keys onto your server. Okay, so if you do experience a problem whereby this doesn't work for you, you can actually add these keys manually onto your server. I don't know whether I have that here. When we get there, I'll look at it, but let's just do SSH copy ID. Now SSH copy ID is going to upload a key with this identity, and it uploads the public key, and then that will be the user and your IP address. So I'm just going to copy this entire thing because I'm going to replace it on Notepad. The path to our key, that is a path to our key, but just remember that when you're uploading to your server, you need to upload the public key. So that is a public key that is called .pub. Let me just copy my IP and save it here because I will use it a lot. Control V, and this, I will copy this, and let me just save it somewhere up there. So if I copy this, this will add our key. SSH copy ID will add the public key. Okay, so the key you're adding is a public key, and you're adding it for this user. So if you want to add the key for a different user, you'll need to do the same thing for the different user that you're adding the key to. So you can use the same key for multiple users. If you're paranoid, create different keys. So I will come back. Still, this is on the local computer. Make sure you're not logged into your server when you're doing this. So on my local PC, I'll just paste that in. Enter. It's going to ask me to log into my server. And once I log in successfully, it will add the key. So it's asking me for the password for this user. For this user, I'll enter the password. Now you can see number of keys added, 1. Now try logging into the machine. So we're going to see how to log in into our server. So if you do experience an error with SSH copy ID, probably you're on a Mac. Sometimes on a Mac, you won't be able to use SSH copy ID unless you install Homebrew. So if you install Homebrew and you install SSH copy ID, you can Google how to install that. But if you don't want to go through that process, what you can do is you can go to log into your server, and then on your server, make a directory called .ssh, and then create a file called sudo nano ssh keys. So this one line is going to create a folder called .ssh, and it's also going to create a file called authorized keys. Now, instead of this authorized keys, all you have to do is come into, and you can see I'm opening it with nano. Make sure you open it with nano, because I noticed that when you open it with Vim doesn't put everything in one line as it should. So what you'll do if you experience an error, just bear with me. If everything worked well for you, you'll come in here into .pub, and then you can open it with Visual Studio Code. And when you open this with Visual Studio Code, you can see it's just one line. Control A, Control, copy everything, and then go into your server. This is just an example that I'm doing, but on my local computer, I can do, I don't know, the nano is installed, and if it is not installed, too bad. But let me just create nano. Let me just try nano you can see nano is installed. It comes with git bash. That is good news. Now all you have to do is on the first line there, just paste in the key like that. It needs to be on one line just like it is, and then you save. And to save on nano, you'll do Control X and then Y to accept the changes. Okay, you can see permission denied, but anyway, you see what you need to do. This is what you need to do, okay? You just need to paste in the file and save it. If you message me and tell me that your SSH copy ID didn't work, this is what I'm going to tell you to do anyway. Once you copy the key and you save it successfully, make sure you come down and you change the permissions. And most importantly, after changing the permissions, make sure you also do this with the new user. And the reason for doing this is because if you don't do this, your user will not be able to log in with those keys. Let's go and see how we can log into our server. So just in brief, to log into your server, you need to SSH into your server using the user IP, user plus the IP address, and then with the identity of the key. So for this, you're going to use the private key. Where was it saved? You're going to add the link to your private key here. Copy. Come in here. Control V. Now SSH username IP. So I will replace that with this. Thank God we copied that. We copied it and saved it there. Paste. And then the identity of the key. Identity of the key, we're just going to copy it up to that point. We don't use the .pub. .pub is the public key, and we don't need to use the public key here. We're using the private key. And if you had changed, and when we get there, we'll see this, but if you change the port, you also need to specify the port. So maybe you are logging in with port. Maybe that's your new port. Once we change the port, you'll need to add the port as well. But in this case, we have not changed the port yet. We're going to see how we can change our SSH port. For now, let's just copy this so that we can log into our server. I will clear the screen. Control L. Paste. Enter. You see that it's asking me for the passphrase. So I'll just enter the passphrase that I set. There we go. You're now logged into your server. At this point, you can disable the root user from logging in via SSH. You can also disable password authentication. So I'm just going to do Control L to clear the screen so that we can do those last two steps. Disable root user from logging in. So we'll just, for this I'm using Vim. If you don't know how to use Vim, I do have a Vim tutorial here. There's also a video for it. You can watch the video to learn how to use Vim. So I will come here. I will open the SSH configuration file. So if I come back into my server where I'm logged into the server, paste in that. I need to enter the password for my sudo user. We want to edit two things. We want to change permit root login to no. If I want to search for this, if you come here under Vim, you can see all this search. You can do / plus the string you want to search. And then you can use N, capital N or small n. So capital N is basically just Shift N to navigate up and down, and then press I to edit. We will search for permit root login. I'm already on the normal mode. So you want to go into normal mode. I'll just press escape to ensure that I'm in normal mode. And then once you're in normal mode, after pressing escape, make sure that you press / and then I will paste in the string that I want to search. Paste. And you can see it has found permit root login. So if I press enter, it's going to search for that. So I can go up and down using N. So I'm just pressing the small n, and you'll see that it can find permit root login. Yes, so it has found the permit root login that was added by Vultr. You can see there was one which was up there and it was commented out. So they've added this to allow root login. I don't think there's any other. Let me press N again. So if I press N, it goes to the first one. So just press N until you get to permit root login, the one that we want. Okay, so you can see we have permit root login down here. If I want to go to the end, enter the $sign. When I press the $sign, it takes me to the last character of this. So I'll just delete it. So I'm just pressing delete. If I want to undo anything I've done, I'll just press U. And when I press U, it's going to undo those changes that I've made. So let me press I to go into insert mode. If you're not in insert mode, you won't be able to enter anything. So you can see down there, it tells me it's in insert mode. I can just delete normally using the delete keys, and then I'll enter NO for no. And now if I want to exit Vim, I can do Shift ZZ, that is going to save, or I can do Shift ZQ, and that's going to omit any changes that I've made, and it's just going to close the file without saving anything. Or you can also do the :WQ, but I'm used to Shift ZQ, Shift ZZ. So if I come back here, what else did we need to change on this file? We've already changed permit root login to no, so root user will not be able to log in. The next thing that we need to change before we end the video will be password authentication. Now, before I save, let me do escape. We'll press escape so that I can go back to normal mode because I want to search again. So to search, I'll just do /, and then I will paste using Shift Insert, and I will press enter. And then I can go up, and if I press N, it's going to show me all the occurrences for password authentication. So there it is. It was just there. I don't know why I didn't notice it. So password authentication, you can see there's a password authentication here, which is yes, but this one is commented out. So let's just go and edit the one that was already edited down here. So this one was probably added because you didn't use your SSH keys. You did not set an SSH key when you're deploying your Ubuntu server. So I'm going to press I to go into insert mode. So if you are finding this a bit tedious, what you can do is you can just use nano. Wherever there is VI, use nano. This will be no. Password authentication, no. Permit root login, no. So I'm going to do Shift ZZ to save. Or if you want to save, you can also do :WQ. Okay, so this will be saving and quitting. If you don't want to save, you can do :Q!! So I want to do Shift ZZ to save and quit. Before I even do that, I need to go to escape mode. So I'm just going to press escape on my keyboard. And then I will do Shift ZZ to save and exit. All right, so the next thing, we need to reload SSH. You need to reload SSH. Password authentication has been saved. We need to do sudo service SSH restart. To restart it, if you're Debian Ubuntu, use that. So now, if we try to log in as root, we should experience an error. Let me come and copy. Let me just copy the whole thing because I'm going to use it at some point. So if I come here, let's paste that in. I want to try to log in with root, so I'll do SSH. Enter. So this will refuse. We cannot log in via SSH using the root user. Now let's try to log in with a password without telling the system the location of our key. SSH. Paste. So this will assume that we want to log in with the key. So normally, if you don't disable password authentication, you'd be able to work with this even if you have an SSH key. But in this case, it won't work because we've disabled password authentication. So if I press enter, you can see permission denied. You cannot log in without the key. If you want to log in, you need to tell the system explicitly where your key is. So we're going to copy that. And we're going to try to log in. Enter the passphrase. And there you go, you're logged in. All right, that pretty much covers how to set up SSH key authentication on Ubuntu 22.04. I've tried this on Debian 11 and Debian 10 and it works. So you can follow along with Debian 10, Debian 11, and everything is going to work smoothly. What is the next step in our server setup? The next step is Ubuntu Firewall setup. So I'm just going to brush up on this, because normally if you're going to install a control panel, setting up the firewall will probably be done by your control panel. If you're installing HTTP, then you can just leave that to HTTP. But it's important to install UFW, because it will make your work very easy in setting up your firewall. Let's do that next. After setting up SSH key login for Ubuntu, let's move on to firewall. Let's see how we can set up Ubuntu 22.04 firewall. And we're going to use the uncomplicated firewall, which makes working with Ubuntu Firewall much easier. To get to this page, just go to bizanosa.com/ubuntu22 to follow along with this setup. So we've done all the above. Right now we are here, firewall setup. We're just moving down the line, and we're going to move on until we finish everything on that list. First of all, you can just do UFW status to see if UFW is set up on your server. Sudo UFW status. So you can see it is active, and we have these rules added onto our server. So we don't need to install it. If you are on Debian 11, you probably need to install it first of all before you can continue. By default, before you even do anything on your server, before you install anything, you just want to deny all outgoing traffic and deny all incoming traffic. By default, we want to allow outgoing traffic, and then we also want to deny incoming traffic. Deny incoming traffic. I don't really have a website. What are people coming to do? So I'm going to deny the traffic. So if there's any specific port that you need to allow, you can allow it, or any specific service that you need to allow, you can allow it. So like for instance, after doing that, let's do status again to see what is available for us. UFW status. Okay, we can see this one is still there, but what happens if I allow it again? What's going to happen? SSH. By default, SSH port is port 22. Let me just Control L. I will clear the screen. Paste. Sudo UFW allow SSH. Enter. So rule added. It was already there. What do you mean it has been added? So you've added it twice. Okay. So you can see this is there. That's not a problem. Just let that be like that. You can see it allows it for V6. If you scroll up, you'll see that it was allowed, but now it has allowed it again. If you want to delete it, you can delete it. You can do sudo UFW status numbered, enter, and this is going to give your rules numbers. So maybe you want to delete number 1. So let's delete number 1, the first one. If you want to delete it, if you come back, all these are available here, so you won't get lost. You can allow a port, and then you can delete, like in our case. Let's come back and delete UFW, delete number 1. You need to confirm it there. You can see it has been shown to you there, the rule. So you press Y to accept, or no to reject. So we can do numbered again, and you can see it is not available. So we also want to delete the one for V6, that is IPv6. So let's delete rule number 2. Allow TCP, nope. I don't want to delete that. So I want to, so delete rule number 2. Enter. Proceed with operation Y. We're going to delete allow 22. Yes, delete that rule. Let me do Control L. Let me just go up. I'm sure I'm going to find it. There's no point in typing if I can find it. So we do have the rules that we've created. So we won't be locked out of our server. If you delete these two, you will be locked out of your server. We'll be allowing a port for our SSH once we change the port. Let me just, we'll do that when you get there. But you can allow a port like that. Maybe your Kubernetes, you're running Kubernetes, there are certain ports that need to be allowed. You can allow a port, you can allow a range of ports, certain HTTP non-protocols. You can allow them. You can allow HTTP and HTTPS. Of course, ours is enabled because we found when we ran status, it showed us the rules that we had. So we don't need to enable it. But if you run enable, you'll see what it will tell you. Firewall is active and enabled on startup. So if you do sudo status again, it will just show you the rules that you have. If you add any more rules, you'll see them here. If you're unable to access maybe traffic, you create a website, you're unable to access it, come in here and enable the two ports that I've shown you, the two services for HTTP and HTTPS. They will enable the default port for this. If you want to use a different port for anything, make sure you explicitly enable that port. We will allow a different port when we get to this part. We're going to change the port and then we're going to allow that port. Let's continue with that next step where we'll change the SSH port and then we're going to allow it on our firewall. If you're installing something like CyberPanel, STSCP, most of the times you'll find that these control panels will set up the firewall rules that you need because they have certain ports that they need to use. So in that case, you'll find that anything that you've set up in UFW, you'll find in your control panel, and you can use your control panel as well, especially STSCP. You can use that as well to add and remove or disable certain rules, certain ports just on the dashboard, on the STSCP dashboard. At the end of this, I'm going to install STSCP and you're going to see what I mean. So for now, let's continue with Ubuntu change SSH port. Let us change the Ubuntu 22.04 SSH port. The default port is port 22. So the first thing I want to do is I want to allow this port in UFW. To allow the port in UFW, I'm just going to use this port as an example. So I'll copy that and I want to allow it on my firewall first of all. I will do Control L to clear the screen and then I will do paste, enter. You need to be root, okay? I need to edit that, but I definitely need to add sudo, and it has added it. And if we do sudo UFW status, it's going to show us that our port has been added. So the next thing is for me to edit the SSH configuration file. And if you don't want to use Vim, you can always use Nano, okay? So in this case, let me just use Nano 2. Copy. We want to change the SSH port. Paste. Enter. I will come down here, port 22. Delete, and then I will add in the new port, which is 7059. And I'm just going to save. Control X and then Y, enter. And I will do SSH. Not really SSH. I will do sudo service. Which service? SSH. What do you want to do with SSH? We want to restart SSH. Enter. There we go. So let's go and try to log in, and you're going to see you can't log in. Okay, so let me try to log in. And I'm going to log in like this without explicitly declaring the port that I want to use. Enter. So I'm logging in via the SSH keys that we set up. If you forgot how to set SSH key, just go back to that video or go back to that section on this post and you'll see how to set it up. We have to let the system know which port are we logging into. So I'm just going to do -p 7059. enter the passphrase. So if anybody tries to log into your server using the default port, they're going to be surprised. They will never be able to access your server. And that's just one thing to help secure your server. Most people think that you get hacked by people sitting in front of computers. No, you're actually hacked by systems, robots, okay? People have bots, systems that scan IP addresses. They try to access using the default ports, default passwords, default usernames. So that's why you have to change your root user and you have to use SSH key. If you do that, your chances of being hacked just go down. It doesn't mean you're foolproof, but this will help you. You can see now if somebody tries to log in using the default port, they will be surprised. They will hit a wall. They will never go past that wall because they're unable to know your port. And this is good. So change the port. And you've seen how you can change your port. Let's see what's next. After we change the SSH ports, the next thing is create a swap file, okay? We are now getting away from the security things. We are going to create a swap file. Everything that we've done so far, you can watch in any of the sections for the videos that we've done. In any of the different sections, you'll find all this. Right now, let's start creating a swap file. If you want to follow along, just go to bizanosa.com/Ubuntu22, and that's going to redirect you to this page. Just click there on swap file, and we're going to see how you can create a swap file. The swap file is like a memory. My server comes with 2048 MB of RAM. So maybe your server is smaller than mine or bigger than mine. Either way, you still need to create a swap file so that when systems that are running on your VPS encounter lack of memory, what they'll do is they will move some items will be moved into the swap file, and you can use the swap file as memory. So that's what a swap file is used for. When your system runs out of memory, some items will be moved into the swap file, and then there will be some memory for the system that needs the RAM at the moment. Let's see how to create a swap file. We are going to start by creating a file, and it will be 2 GB. The file's name will be Ubuntu swap file. I'm just going to use this as it is, but you can change the name. You can even change the folder for where you're storing it. For me, I'm just going to store it in the root directory. So mine is 2 GB, but you can make yours more than 2 GB. So what is the rule? The rule usually is if you have memory that is 2 GB and below, create a swap file that is twice as much as your memory. So if you have 1 GB, create 2 GB. If you have like 2 GB, create 4 GB. If you have 4 GB and above, you can create half of it. Just create like 2 GB or half or similar. So if you have 4 GB, you can create 4 GB or 2 GB either. So for me, I'm going to, since I have 2 GB, I'm going to create mine for 4 GB. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to copy this. So what this does, it basically just creates a file and then allocates 2 GB to that file, and it will allocate the space from your SSD. So you're using NVMe SSD on Vultr. It's going to get the 2 GB from your disk space. I will need to change mine to 4 GB. There you go, the file has been created. We can go and look for it, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to change the permission for the file. I'll do Control L. Just remember, even if you Control L, you can always scroll up to see all the commands which are still there. So I'm going to paste. I will enter. The permissions have been changed. I don't need to see and confirm if they've been changed. The third thing is to convert the swap file. Now, the next thing, I will just copy that. Paste. Enter. So the swap for that has been turned on. Let's do free H. So you can see there was already 4 GB of swap that was created, and I've added another. So before you do this, you can always check the status just to see if there is any swap that is recognized by your system. Now that I've added it, let's just continue. I'm just going to add it into this file. Now when you add it into the etc fs tab file, this file is a file that lets the system know all the memory locations. So that means that when you restart your system, it's going to know that there's a swap file that is my Ubuntu swap file. So let's go and open that file, and I'm going to edit it. And I'm editing it with Vim. So I'm going to do enter, and you can see there's already a swap file here called swap file swap defaults, right? So there's a swap file here. So we also need to add ours. We're just going to add the one we've created. So now you have 8 GB of swap memory. I mean, that's too much, but what the hell? You'll see what to do with all this swap memory. So I will come in here, and this is really nice. The fact that they're adding the swap file for you when you're deploying your server is a good thing, because some people never do this ever. I will do I to go into insert mode, and then I will enter. You can use nano. If you don't want to use Vim, just use nano, where it says sudo vi, use nano. Nano is much easier to use. So that is the location for our swap file. Swap defaults, everything will be 00. Then I'll just do Shift ZZ to save and exit. Oh, I need to go into escape mode. Escape mode first. Press on escape, and then I will do Shift ZZ, and that's going to save and close. And now, even if I restart the system, it's going to recognize our swap file. Sudo swap on. So if I do sudo swap on, I should have done this before you even start setting up your swap file. Make sure you do sudo swap on just to see if there's a swap file that's available. So you can see I have a swap file here that was created by Vultr, and I also have mine that I've created, right? Make sure you check if you already have a swap file by doing sudo swap on. So that is how to create a swap file on Ubuntu 22.04. What is the next process? The next step, we're going to change our server host name. So the next step, we're going to change the server host name. If you're on a different VPS, some VPSes like Contabo, even Hetzner, they usually don't change the host name for you when you're deploying the server. They don't give you that option. Hetzner to some extent, but there are some VPSes like Contabo, you'll get some weird name, host name. We're going to see how we can change the host name next. Let's continue. The next step, let's see how to change the server host name. If you're not already on this page, you can just go to bizanosa.com/Ubuntu 22. So I'm going to change the server host name. Just click there. Hostname control, and then you can set the host name. Now this does a bunch of different things, but what you want to do with it is just to change the host name, and then you'll use the host name that you want to use there. So make sure you're using a fully qualified domain. A fully qualified domain could be a subdomain or a full domain. Like in this case, this is a subdomain. So let's say I want to change mine to that. I'll come back here, and you can check your current host name on Ubuntu 22.04. Just type host name. I changed it to this. So let's see how we can change it to something else that is a fully qualified domain name. I can use this as my sample because I'm not using this server for anything, but make sure you're using a fully qualified domain name. So this part here, a fully qualified domain name is a domain that can be accessed. When you add DNS records, it can be accessed. So that's a fully qualified domain name. So instead of using example.com, let me just use bizanosa.com as an example. So I'll use this as an example. And when I do this, it's going to change my server host name. So right now the server host name has been changed. The next step is for you to add the host name onto your hosts file. Now the hosts file is this one here. It's found inside of etc hosts. Now this is like a DNS for your Linux server. Even Windows has a hosts file. This is something that just points an IP address to a host name. So that's what we want to do inside of this file. Let's go and see what we have inside of this file. So I'll open it with nano, and you can see that it's already telling me that this system is configured to use something different to change my host name. So even if I change this, it's not going to persist. But let me just tell you how to change it here, because maybe your VPS is different from mine. Mine is Vultr, and with Vultr, the new VPSs, if you change the hosts file, it usually will not register. It will not register. You have to change it somewhere there. So let me just tell you how you can change it here if your VPS is not like mine, and if you change it here, it will persist. If you change it here and it will persist, this is how you can change it on your VPS. So you can just leave the first two as they are, and then down here you can see I already tinkered with this file a bit, and I added this, my IP. So the next thing you want to add is your IP as well, and this is a host name, and this is just an alias for your host name. When you log in, that's what should be up there. The changes that I put here are not registering, and if I restart the server, any changes I make will just be overwritten. That's how you can change the hosts file. Just come in here, put your IP address, and if the if this localhost IPs don't have it, then you need to add the localhost IP with the host name and then the alias, and then do the same for your IP address. Just copy your IP address, paste it there, and then that is your host name, that the one that you've changed to, and then that is the alias. So let me copy so I'll just do Control X. I want to copy this. Copy. So let me show you how you can add it here. If you're to add it here, just come all the way down with your cursor and add it. Shift insert to paste. I will paste that there. So do the same for this one. But for now, even if I save this and I restart, the changes will not persist. But maybe on your VPS, they will persist. It depends on your VPS configuration. So like in this one, if I do sudo reboot, so if I was to go back into that file, you'll see that my changes have been overwritten. My changes were removed. Okay, so you can see they tell you if you want to make these changes, you can make the changes in the template file, or you can remove this value inside here. So even if you remove this value here, it's not there. So we're just going to do this the hard way, and the best way I can think of is just to copy this and to make those changes inside of this file. And we're just going to add the changes that we need inside of this file, and when it starts, it's going to copy those from this template file. So I'm just going to do Control X to get out of here, and then I will do sudo, and I will open it with nano, and you can see this is where it's getting the templates for your host file. So even if you put it in here, it is not a problem. Now the only issue that I found was that sometimes even when you change this, it's not going to register in the hosts file. So I found that the easiest way for me to deal with this was just to put the manual copy. So the easiest thing was just for me to put the manual host name and the fully qualified domain in there, instead of using the placeholders, instead of using the templates. You can just put this. So what I mean is, if we come back into the server and you scroll down here where it says fully qualified domain name and host name, you can just remove this. Shift insert to paste inside of git bash, And then for this one as well, I'll just remove all this. So put your IP address down here so that your server can know that your hostname is mapped to your IP address. So I'm going to do shift insert again. This will work with Vultr and a bunch of VPS providers that follow the same method. If yours is different, maybe the virtualization environment is different, then it may not work like this. I'm going to save, Control X, Y, enter. And let me just confirm if this is going to change it. If it doesn't change it, let's come back here. It's not going to change it yet until we reboot. But if it doesn't change it, we need to go inside of this file and change something from false to true. Control X. Let me reboot. Give it some time to start back up. So you just do Control L to clear the screen. So let's go back into that file. So let me just go into the file and see what the issue is. So you can see the problem is I used example and my hostname is that. So the issue is it was unable to resolve, and that's because that's not my hostname. My hostname is this. You remember I changed it. So if you're following along, you know exactly what the issue is, and I don't really have to explain this. So I'm just going to copy, and I will take it back into that file, the file that I was working with, back into the templates file. So let's save that, Control X, and let's reboot. So you can see the error has gone away, and you can see your hostname has been saved as it should be. If you want the changes to persist, you change them in the template directly. Now, if they don't change, you can also go into this file, copy. If you're unable to actually change the hostname itself, and that is by using the hostname ctl command, you can go into this file, mine is already changed to true. So if yours is not changing the hostname itself, even after you reboot, the hostname is not changing because you're unable to use the hostname set update command, then come here and change this to true. Mine is already changed to true. So this should help you change your server hostname. So the next step in this setup is to set time zone. The next thing is to set time zone for your server. And that's very easy. You're just going to do that. If you don't have this, install it, sudo apt install that. If you're following along on Debian 11, you may need to install that. And then after that, we're going to go into setting up automatic update for Debian 11, and that will be the last thing that we need to do for our server in this Ubuntu 22.04 initial server setup. The next step, of course, you want your server to have the same time zone as you, where you are. Change your server time zone to that. And on Ubuntu and Debian, you can use tzdata to change that. This makes your work very easy. All you have to do is copy that and then choose your location. So come to this page, bizanosa.com/Ubuntu22, and copy that. If tzdata is not installed, you can install it. On Debian, maybe it's not installed, just install it. And then paste, enter, and choose your continent. For me, I'm in Africa, so I'll choose Africa, enter, and then Nairobi. Just press N to go to your city. Press a letter for your city. For me, I'll press N, and that will take me back to Nairobi. I'll press N, and that should bring me to Nairobi. And then I'll press Tab to go to OK. Tab, and then enter. If I look at time, I'm in date, enter, and it's going to give you your time zone. If you change it, enter, and then you do date again, it's going to change the time zone. All right, that's how to change the time zone on Ubuntu 22.04 server. The next thing, we're going to set up automatic updates on Ubuntu 22.04. And then after that, what remains? After that, we can install HTTP. So the next step, we're going to configure automatic updates on Ubuntu 22.04. So if you try to install anything on your new Vultr server and you get this error, let's come back here and we're going to do install sudo apt install tzdata, and you get this. Let's just try to run sudo DPKG, copy, paste, run that. Let's just try to install it again. And it's going to tell you that the package already exists. So when you get this error, and I'm using a Vultr server, just run sudo dpkg configure-a. That should fix it. So when you get this error, just run what it's telling you to run there, and the issue will be fixed. We are back, and the next thing we want to do is set up automatic updates on Ubuntu 22.04. If you're not already on this post, just go to bizanosa.com/ubuntu22, and then you can go to step 11, set up automatic updates. So let's get started with this. I'm going to log into my Vultr server. I'm already logged in. This is where we stopped. This is the last thing we did. So let me just do Control X to get out of this file. Control L. So just go to this post and then come to step 11. Let's just make sure that we don't have any updates. Okay, we don't have any updates. Control L to clear the screen, and then I will install an unattended upgrades package. Now this is the one that will help us to automatically update our Ubuntu server or Debian server. You can follow along with the Debian server as well. I'm going to paste that in there. We want to install this package. It's already installed. On Debian, probably not, but on Ubuntu, it's already installed. And then we need to enable automatic updates. So what this will do, it will enable automatic updates. Let's enable automatic updates. So this is just going to configure it with low priority. And then it will enable unattended upgrades. This is important because if you don't do this, there are certain files that you will not generate. Once you do this, it's going to generate certain files that will be edited later on, that can be edited later on if you so need to. This will turn on the automatic upgrade, DPKG started error. Okay, so this is a problem with my website, but don't worry. The issue is this priority. This has double hyphens. These are double hyphens. They're being merged into one, which shouldn't be the case. So when you get there, make sure you put 2 hyphens for priority. Enter. And that's going to ask you if you want to enable this. You can read that if you want to automatically download and install stable updates. Yes. Press enter. That will enable the updates. So just remember, when you get here, these are 2 hyphens. On Debian, make sure you do that, because there's a package that you'll try to install, but will not be there. And I also added that there for you if you're following along on Debian. And then the next thing, we need to confirm update notifier. Update notifier common. This will enable you to reboot. If you need the system to automatically reboot, you need this package. So let's see if it is still available on Ubuntu. Okay, on Ubuntu, it's already installed. On Debian, you're probably going to miss it, but they're going to give you another name that you can install. Just install the other one that they give you. The next step is to configure what you need updated. So this is a file that we need to go into. We're going to configure what you need updated. So let's just open this in. You can open it using Nano. If you don't want to use Vim, just change Vim to Nano. If you're on Debian, make sure that you do sudo apt install Vim, because maybe it doesn't come with Vim, it comes with VI, but you want to use Vim. Best sudo VI. If you don't know how to use Vim, I do have a tutorial for that. Let's search on another window. You can just search for Vim. Just search for Vim on my website. You should find it. There's a video, and you can follow the video while you read all this. Okay. So let's go back. This file is going to tell the system which packages to update, or which specific items to update, or what to do after updates. So unattended update, you can see it's going to update the distro. It's going to update security. If there's any security related items, it will update that. These are just comments. And then it will also update apps security. Those are for specific apps. And then you'll also update distro apps. If there's any kind of security that needs to be updated for specific packages, it will be done. And then of course you need to enable this. This is the one that will update your packages. So if you have any packages update installed on your Ubuntu, then enable this, and it is going to automatically update those as well. And then this, you can ignore this too, unless you have specific packages that you want updated based on this, then you can check that out. If you don't know what this means, just Google them. By this, make sure you enable that, remove the comments. And then something else that is important, maybe you're running a certain PHP version and you don't want PHP to be updated. You can exclude certain packages. So inside of Vim, if you want to edit anything, you just press I. You're now in insert mode in Vim. You don't want to update certain packages. Maybe you don't want to update MariaDB. Add the quotation marks, add the double quotes for your packages. So maybe the next one you don't want to be updated. PHP. And then also you don't want a package that starts with ng, maybe something like that. Even PHP, maybe you want a package, you don't want to update any PHP packages, so maybe it starts with that, PHP and something like that. And then also you can also look at that, use to explicitly define the end of a package name. Without the that, libc would match all of them. So you use this to explicitly define the end of a package name. So if the package name is MariaDB, maybe you can add the $. Add the $, to explicitly mark its end. That way it won't match anything else. Maybe MariaDB sub packages, other packages that start with MariaDB. So that's something that you can do here. You can blacklist certain packages so that they don't get updated. Or maybe you don't want packages that start with the Linux also to not be updated. You can change that. Of course, just like with everything else on this, on this, make sure that you end it with a colon, with a semicolon. So ensure you end everything with a semicolon. Okay, let's scroll down and see what else is here. Unattended upgrade, dev release, auto. Now, if you want to automatically update the Ubuntu development release, of course, that's something that you should probably put at false on a production server. Put that at false. Let's see what else is here. Okay, now there are certain things here. If you want to receive emails, unattended upgrade mail, you can receive emails. So that one you've looked at. Unattended autofix, interrupt, forget that, install updates, unattended upgrade, install on shutdown, false. So you can read that to see the options that you have. You can send email, so unattended upgrade mail, and then the email address. Let me just copy that from here. I know I must have an email address sample there. So unattended mail, you put the mail inside of the quotation marks there. So of course, first of all, you'd need to uncomment it, and then you put your mail there. So make sure this is a working mail, and your server needs to have a way for sending mail. So you need to have maybe Dovecot or Exim installed so that your server can send mail. You can use any address email there as long as your server can send mail. Then you can get the mail report here. If you want only to receive mail when there is an error or when there's an update, you can use only on error or only on change, or you can use always. Okay, so if anything happens, you'll receive the updates. That is with always. And then unattended upgrade, remove unused kernel packages there. So if you want to remove the packages that are outdated, the kernel versions that are updated, you can do that. You can set that to true, just uncomment it. The one that I'm looking for is automatically reboot, this one. So you can also set this on. If you want to reboot your server after these automatic updates, you can set that to false or true. The package that we installed is a package that will help us with this. So if you want to restart your server after the update, you can do that. Apt install update notifier. Yeah, I hope you install that. If you don't install this, the reboot will not happen. So let's come back here, and I'm just going to do Control X. Control X. Oh, not Control X. We are not in Nano. We are in Vim. And then I'll press Escape, and then I'll do Shift ZZ to save on Vim. There. And let's just check. So if we receive a feedback, then it means that our automatic updates for Ubuntu are turned on. There you go. So unattended upgrade there, it will check it every day. If you want it for every 7 days, you can change that to 7. So that's pretty much how to enable automatic updates for Ubuntu 22.04. You can follow this to enable automatic updates for Debian 11 as well. Install. Now, if you want to use a control panel like Hetzner, you can do that. Once you do all these steps, you can install your control panel. Just come here and go to the script generation page and then install it using that script. All right, so that's pretty much it for this Ubuntu 22.04 initial server setup. In this full video, I used Vultr. If you want to use a different VPS, you can do so. If you want to get $100 credit from Vultr or from Linode, the buttons are up here. That's pretty much it for this Ubuntu initial server setup. Make sure you watch all the sections and you follow along. carefully. And if you do have any questions, just ask me and I will assist.